Hello and welcome to the Finding Voices podcast. I'm Eugene Wasowski Gallagher.
Alex is here.
Tom Wheeler.
And so today we're going to be talking about, I think, pills for stammering, which Tom will
Stammering drugs,
introduce much
stammering medication, and
Substances for stuttering.
Yeah.
better. Okay.
basically a physical alternative to psychological help.
Chemical intervention into your body
Yep.
to treat stuttering.
So the main things I think we're trying to, or we're talking about targeting, is the anxiety from stammering. That you fear you're going to stammer, therefore you stammer. Potentially the memory. So if you
Bullshit.
don't remember
Shake.
stammering, you might have a different reaction. And some other, like,
I'd also like to add that later in this episode I'm going to be talking about my experience with Nahim Bazar, or Basha, who's pioneering some work into stammering at the UCL Institute, not the UCL Institute, at UCL, and I recently was a participant of one of his tests, or their experiments, and I can recount to you the tale, if you so require. But first, shall we open the floor with some discussion about what what day-to-day stimulants, pills, whatever people use or have tried in the past, obviously with not much success, to combat their speech impediment.
so the obvious one would be alcohol.
What do you say? It's obvious.
Well, no,
But I kind of made an attempt to speak more fluently with alcohol, and I have been through periods when my speech has actually gotten worse on alcohol than it has without alcohol, which actually led me to become pretty teetotal for a while in reaction to the fact that my speech was deteriorating on alcohol.
Okay. I have numerous ideas on that because I too have experienced the same thing.
Okay.
So, point one is you have shall we call it to be pharmaceutically accurate? We'll call it a therapeutic dose,
Okay.
which is the amount you have to have drunk in a period to have the desired effect. So, like, it'll be presumably just before you're tipsy,
yes.
or else absolutely blind hammered. One or the other, but obviously it varies a bit with people. But I presume that relates to the blocking of your inhibitions. Like, I personally become really talkative and will talk to strangers at that particular point. People who I do not know, who I normally wouldn't talk to, I'd strike up a half an hour conversation with them. Then I think the other, like, in my experience, there's also the, like, not quite the hangover, but like, I experience a dropping of motivation in the days following
Yes.
drinking, which, like, a bit like being ill or whatever, seem to correlate with not having good speech. And because obviously nothing physically has changed about me compared with the previous days, like, because obviously you'd caught up from sleep and all the rest of it, I can only conclude that it is like, that stammering requires, or not stammering requires, an amount of motivation, which if you
I
lose
think it
that,
requires effort.
yeah,
And also, well, I've heard that, like, after you've been out drinking, the hangover is, like, partly based around anxiety. And as in, like, sometimes when you drink, the after effects of drinking is anxiety the next day. And I've certainly felt that after I've been out sometimes. I've woken up and been more timid, more shy, more anxious around people.
Cool.
Maybe that's just excessive drinking as opposed to moderate drinking.
And as Tom is the student,
Yeah,
you're
I
more
think I got-
familiar with that.
I'm closer to the age in which I used to drink a lot.
Yeah.
I don't drink as much as I used to, largely because I feel as if it's having a negative impact on my speech. Genuinely, I don't speak as much. Oh no, sorry, I don't drink as much.
Don't speak
I
as
speak
much
more as a
thanks to your
consequence.
drinking.
I speak more as a consequence. I don't speak less.
Okay. Let's stick with the obvious ones. For now, anyway. Another obvious one would be cigarettes, which I do not have any experience with.
Okay.
I know only from smoking shisha, which I think contains tobacco. On the day, because it dries my throat out horrendously, I actually improved my speech.
Okay.
But I think,
With shisha.
yeah. But it could be because the
Relaxing.
enormous amount of effort I put into it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In between all the coughing and spluttering.
Probably over ventilated and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know because that just makes me super tense. So that evening and the day after, I find it quite hard to relax, which I think means I will stammer. But that is more from a physical side, as in because I feel I can't breathe properly.
Yes. The breathing thing is the biggest bugbear with smoking, in that I have done a bit of smoking cigarettes and that, and I find that my speech gets worse on the whole if I'm smoking a cigarette. I think it's because my chest becomes tighter, and I feel as if I don't want to inhale as much as I used to, because I feel as if like I'm inhaling smoke and ash and that kind of stuff. I like the taste of smoke, but I realise that I cannot speak as well with it. So, again, like alcohol, it's something that I can't take it, which in the long run will make me, I think, a healthier person, and I might benefit in a way, but I want to. Basically, I wouldn't mind doing it, but I cannot.
On the nicotine side, because there is now obviously the third variation, which is those e-cigarette things, those vapor things.
Yeah.
I have a soft spot for those. This is a pain in the ass.
But has it helped or worsened your stammer?
That one, because it is I think especially the ones which don't have, well, probably do have nicotine in, because it's a much softer sort of thing, and it's a bit less sociable. And because I'm normally quite drunk when I'm doing it, it's maybe a combination of the two. For that brief period, my speech is normally pretty good. Because you're sort of, because of the vapor stuff, it sort of makes your breath extra heavy, so it's very easy to do a deep and breathy tone, because it isn't it's more dense.
Okay.
And then you just sort of feel like you deep and breathy tone.
So you'd actually recommend
Well,
use of vaping?
I wouldn't
in a way.
recommend it.
But
just
it actually helps.
observation. For me.
Well, perhaps with you, because I think actually that's why I don't like cigarettes, is because it makes me speak from higher up in the chest.
Yeah.
But if vaping does the opposite, then maybe it's worth investing in.
Well, don't invest.
Not
too
invest,
much.
but like at least experimenting with.
Yeah. I'm of the view you can't try everything at least once.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Let me tell you guys about cigarettes and stuff. I I think the best part about smoking, it's a meditative part. This repetition of doing something over and over again, it would calm your nerves.
Mm.
You don't have to have a cigarette in your mouth for that. Uh, Vaping, yeah, Robert Dick. Anyway, and about alcohol and nicotine and substances. The way it works, it triggers your brain that something is going on which is not really going on. When we do alcohol, we triggering our brain into thinking that we are suffocating.
Really?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
that makes sense.
So what our brain gives us in return, it gives us a big amount of serotonin, so we'll feel better and we'll feel really nice, right? We started to feel like alcohol coming in, yay!
Maybe.
Right?
Mm.
At the same time, because our brain thinks we drowning, it gives us amount of dopamine as well. And what dopamine does, it gives us creativity, so we can come out of this situation. And I think that makes us do crazy shit when we're drunk.
I think a quick clarification. I think I don't think it makes you feel like you're drowning. I think it's more. It makes you feel like you don't need to
Oh
breathe.
no, we don't feel it.
No,
We don't
as
feel
in
it's just
we normally breathe on reflex, according to how much carbon dioxide is in the air. If you want the physiology of it. So if you drink alcohol, it would reduce your
no. It has no
No?
effect on our lungs.
On
It has no
that
effect on nothing.
reflex. No.
It's
Okay.
it's just that particular chemical triggers the brain to work as we were suffocating. Look,
Okay, I see. So
if
it's
if I light up a match and I throw it into gasoline, what
Yeah.
will happen? It will start burning.
so the brain reaction is the same.
In
is what you're
terms of
saying.
brain reaction, it's lighting up a match and throwing it into a fake fireplace while turning on the heat
Mm.
and the lighting in the fireplace.
So it would feel the same
So you feel the heat is coming.
in your brain, but you don't have
It's just
to
no fire is going on.
experience it.
Okay, and alcohol, it's a depressant. And I think we can make a segue to all the articles you send us about Gerald Maguire.
Have you researched him as
I
well?
I read everything you sent me, and I researched, and I listened to a podcast with him, and I saw him talking, like giving a speech about his stuff.
Yes.
So
What did you think? Of it?
and he talks about altering moods. He well, I thought it was kind of your subject. If you have something to say first, and then I'll say what I think.
Oh, so I am this summer looking to make a documentary, well, not really like a documentary, maybe more like a vlog, in which I record myself experimenting with different stammering drugs which are recommended by Dr. Maguire and different kinds of
Oh.
people. And so that's why I've been looking so much into Dr. Maguire. I'm like aware that a vast swathe of them will have no discernible effect whatsoever, and those that might do will probably have side effects. However, I am willing to experiment with that just to see what I can find, because it's just like worth, I think, exhausting all the possibilities to help your speech out. I think it's worth just like knowing that there is something out there which can help you out. Like even if it's like 15%, 30%, it's worth having a look at it just to see what it's about. Otherwise, you'll live your life, I don't know, maybe like unfulfilled because you haven't had any kind of fluency. Because that's what I'm after, is a much more relaxed, natural approach to stammering. Because I meet people who stammer and they're relaxed about it, and they're also quite natural speaking. Like it's things like, for instance, they'll say, "Hello, I'm Freddie." Like that seems a lot more natural in a way, because there's none of the kind of facial tics, grimaces, all that kind of stuff, which tends to go with stammering. Yeah, so that's why I've taken an interest in Dr. Maguire and looking at them at stuttering medication, because I'm looking to make a documentary to explore that. That's why I'm talking. Haven't explained that very well, but
I grasp it. So this, I presume, is just to compare, because that's all you can do, how your speech is normally, and then on each of the things, and the idea therefore is to, if you need a very quick short-term pick-me-up, for instance, in cases where you're ill, ridiculously tired, but you have to do like some presentation. Like, are we talking about these sorts of scenarios?
Yes, those, and also just day-to-day stammering. I want to find something which can at least alleviate the kind of not the pain, but the symptoms of stammering by about 30%, if I can. But I'm aware that it is pretty unlikely that I'll find anything which will do that. I know that. However, I just want to just exhaust that possibility. Otherwise, I know that it'll plague my mind until I'm a lot older. Because I always think, what if I'd taken this particular thing? Aged 21, my life could have been so much different. At least that's what I think. Might not be true, but that's how I think I will feel if I do not experiment now.
So it's basically, the presumption therefore is that speech has a psychological aspect.
Yes,
Yeah,
it does, but it also has
a small physiological.
a neurological aspect, which is it's entirely about how the brain is built, and trying to combat any of the abnormalities, any of the dysfunctional stuff in the brain.
One more question on this one, because I'm quite curious. Is it so? It would have to be an array of stuff, like which will affect, I presume, like the different areas of your brain. So it'd be like like, for instance, one be about motor control, which would be all the anesthetics.
I don't know what
which would like
drug group the motor control
which would
stuff
like
is in.
block your muscles a
Yes.
bit, but all the brain function remains as normal, and you can then see what happens there. It'd be interesting to see like how much feedback, like, because obviously those substances knock out your feedback long before they knock out the control. It would be interesting to see what effect that one actually has, because I'm quite curious, because I'll be like, ooh, this is quite fun.
Yeah, no, I think we've very interesting. But the reason why I'm making a documentary is largely because I spent so long online searching for visual evidence of someone having taken something and saying, yes, it's worked for me. You get plenty of things on Reddit on different forums saying, yes, this drug's worked for me, but no actual, authentic, tangible evidence. You just get people saying things. And I'm not sold yet until I actually have someone physically telling me it, either via a screen or meeting them in person, that it has worked for them, and I can see it on them, will I believe them? Because I feel like there is so much stuff in the stammering world which promises the world. It says, you know, you'll be cured in 7 minutes after you take this thing. Obviously it's not true, and it's, you have to really see it in your flesh.
So, what sort of time frame are you planning to have this thing work for or not work for? Like, is it?
I'm hoping to do it over about 2 months. 2 months.
Sure.
It is short, but that's just like a random date I've set. I haven't had any kind of detailed planning.
As in, would you expect like, you would take substance, you would then have a period of onset where not much happens, a period of activity where the stuff happens, and then a tailing off period. Would you be expecting it to be like a long-term thing, like as in you would have like a smaller amount but for a much longer period, or would it be you would have a more immediate solution which wouldn't be as good in the long term for numerous reasons?
I think really how I operated would depend on the drug. So some drugs I'd be like, okay, this drug says it'll work in 2 weeks' time after incremental dosages, but that one I'd do 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But basically just see how it goes. I don't really have any proper fixed rules yet. It's very much up in the air.
Yeah.
And I would be more than welcome to hear from everyone. To everyone, I mean, like the one fan we have.
Yeah.
So far.
How about this Jared Maguire guy?
What?
Do you believe in what he's doing?
I not 100%. How about you, Alex?
I have an opinion on the guy.
Yeah,
I mean, if you want, I can. As far as I find out about him, he postulates the theory and trying to prove it that the reason why we stutter is that we have extra amount of dopamine being produced in our body, and he mentioned studies being made in China, like most people who have stutter have a natural more amount of dopamine, so he connects it directly to stuttering. So what he wants to do, he wants to reduce the amount of dopamine. What dopamine is responsible for? It's responsible for learning, it's responsible for motivation, it's responsible for creativity. It's what makes us like a real interesting people, and when we suppress that, well, we kind of become a zombie-like.
I don't think he's saying to fully suppress it. I think he's just saying to reduce it to a more normal level.
Right. So, and I read, well, and he, so what he does, right? No particular medicine is approved to treat stutter. He postulates again that, okay, if you stutter, you must have some other issues. So if I treat those other issues you have, you will your stuttering will become better. He never say that oh uh, I will make you start to disappear. No, no, no. He never says that. So what he does, right? He takes existing medication for treating personal disorders
Mm.
like depression, personality disorders, and he takes this medicine and he gives them to people who stutter
Yeah.
and see how it affects them. And most of the time, if you repress your dopamine, you will lose interest in sex.
Mm.
Mm.
You'll become fat
Mm.
and say bye bye to your creativity.
Mm.
I'd rather freaking stutter. Seriously.
Mm.
I'd rather go mute, but it's just me, you know. So yeah, and it's so and and what they do, they making the own mix. So the end game will be to find something that fits in from the psychological disorders, and then use that for stuttering because it was already pre-approved for other disorders, and he believes that this will give him a shortcut to approve it for stuttering in particular. And I read people who participated in his study.
Mm.
They say horrid things sometimes. Like they're like, well, yeah, it really worked until a doctor told me I was taking a placebo, and then almost everyone who writes that it helps, which might was a placebo effects, and Maguire states it's only 60% successful comparing to a placebo effect. I don't know what the hell he means by this bullshit. Yeah, so
So,
and everyone who stopped taking it started got worse.
Mm.
So well, I think we can't prey on miserable, you know, on the people who stutter.
mm.
We can't cover our intentions behind good intentions. I think my rant is pretty clear
Okay,
on the
good.
subject. Yeah.
I haven't read the articles, which I probably should have done. But from purely like because I did a bit of like pharmacology and stuff in university. The general view is one is that any substance which if you have to take regularly will tend to have a bad impact. Which is fair enough. Is be there's obviously dangers involved, hence the requirement of a doctor to sort of make sure stuff doesn't go south too much. But the thing which I'm curious about from your study, Tom, is what metrics you will be measuring your own stammer on,
Mm.
because you'll have to have two perspectives.
Yeah.
There's one which is yours, which is every time I get horrendously drunk and talk to everybody,
Mm.
I might still stammer, but I don't realise it.
Mm.
And or else I might feel like speaking is such a tough job, but actually be speaking completely fine. Like it
Yeah.
depends on your anxiety levels.
It is a personal metric, and I think that's the same for everyone who stammers. It's entirely a personal thing. It is how you it's entirely how you measure your stammer.
The thing which I'd be interested in then is if you like split it up in on each time, to be like you have staff, and then like every 15 minutes you fill in an extra column on a table. So it'd be stuff like how much, like out of 10, how much do you think you're stammering? And then out of 10, how much does everyone else think you're stammering? What you're like?
There are lots of like questionnaires and variables which I think I need to incorporate into the regime.
I think to get it, because over the course of 2 months, you might you have highs and lows with mood, motivation, blah blah.
So I realised that this whole this whole experiment is also subject to the time of the year, what's happening in my life at the moment. I realised that there are lots of external influences which I then have to take account for.
But if you to make it a more fair test, to factor in all of these hundreds of variables, I would say start to draw up your list of parameters now and fill it in twice a day.
Yeah.
And then if you have a diary, just on each page you just fill them all in. Note any particular events and how you felt about the event, because the events themselves might change your mood without taking anything, and you will then have a pretty good idea of what makes you tick and a pretty good baseline for what it would have to improve upon.
I have a tip on the subject as well. You can give a voice recorder to someone who is always around you, like relative, and ask a relative to surprise you 4 times a day. Like he can come over to you at any time and just tell you now we're recording 10 minutes of our conversation. So no matter how you feel, no matter at this surprise moment, someone comes to you, and then you can listen to all these recordings and count, for example, your blocks, count each time you lost your thought, those kind of things, and how overall you sound.
The only issue with that is you would change the outcome, because if you record it, that bit is fair enough, provided it's done sort of secretly.
Ask person not to tell you that he's recording you.
But when you review it, that will impact, and
someone else has to review it.
And then because otherwise it's a good way to measure it, but it's not a good way because it feeds back into the system.
I was thinking actually of doing a kind of test in which I can measure my speech, whereas I say knock on a door, or I speak to 30 strangers and see how that goes. Basically compile a data sheet of things which I naturally find scary and are never a comfort zone. It's very rare to have a person who stammers who finds speaking to strangers to be in their comfort zone. I'm not sure if that's the case for you.
As long as you can describe your research result mathematically,
Mm.
no problem.
Yeah.
Like
Is-
count something.
Yeah, yeah.
The more parameters you have, the more accurate
Yeah.
your
Model.
image of your stammer will be.
Yeah.
One good way of figuring out how much you stammer, a brilliant way, you have a book which you type up a page from, yeah, and you know the page in your diary.
Yeah.
You read it out to Google Talk, so it
Ah.
does speech to text, because I
Mm.
presume in the space of 2 months or whatever,
Nice.
that won't change that much.
Yeah, yeah.
Open a
Then
book on a
you
random. Yeah.
you write down, or you just copy and paste what Google has interpreted all your text as,
Mm.
because that if
But we
you're
can.
if you're not stammering, it will be very high fidelity. Like it'll be the same as the book.
Yeah.
If you stammer like a boss, you're gonna have all sorts of
Like
half
boss.
words. Yeah, you'll have half words.
Stammer
You'll
like
have
a
swear
boss.
words. You'll have everything in it, and it will. Or you'll have like I'm not sure how the stuff works, but it will just fill it in, and you can then it will visually tell you how much you stammered, and because it's a computer interpreting it, it'll be less subjective.
Mm.
Just an idea. 'Cause
Yeah, and it's been already done, Tom. All you have to do, of course. I mean, there are ways to evaluate your starter,
Oh, I mean, like.
and they're available online. Yeah, like it can be a list of things, and then you reevaluate
I thought you
yourself.
were talking about the documentary.
Oh no, 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 no
I don't think
one.
that's been done yet.
No, well, there are a few good documentaries on this subject. The one I would recommend, Spit It Out.
Just out. Is that about?
It's about guy
Historical.
who started. He made a documentary about his stammer.
Okay.
I was moved. Yeah, so research pills, substances, how
Mm.
it done.
Just out. It's cool.
Did you guys? Yeah, we can move to psychology.
Yeah.
Jeez, we're touching such a deep subject. It's like we're super experts on a thing. Who cares, right?
I think more on the previous topic about like doing this research. It's more about like what the quote is that the difference between someone messing around and someone doing science is the person doing science writes down the results.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely
like,
right.
And if you do it really scientifically to establish a baseline at the beginning and end of each thing, which means you cannot progress to the next thing until your baseline is the same for a particular period. Like,
Right.
in order to
Yeah.
account for natural variation and serendipity with life events where stuff fucks up as much as it wants, and you're like, well.
All right, but so baseline is basically understand where you stand right now.
Yep.
And
What
in order,
triggers your speech,
Yeah.
what helps you out, blah blah blah.
and as that is a subject of our new, how you call it, new part of our podcast is we call it 5 minutes of science. And Tom, I think you would be interested to know that guess not.
I'm just.
There are all people can fit into 10 boxes, psychological boxes. We have in individuality that we can count on our fingers, and we can yeah. So we read one by one. I know I'm here.
Okay.
One of those tens. It's me. I will ask you to guess. So we'll read. You read one. I read one, and then we'll find.
Are we reading the whole thing, whole paragraph, or just the title?
Well,
A bit of it.
a bit of it, as much as you find it interesting,
Okay.
and then we bash on it. Right? Yeah.
The first one is paranoid personality disorder. It is a distrust of others, including friends, families, and partners. The person is suspicious, unguarded. He has a strong sense of personal rights, overly sensitive to setbacks, and easily feels shame and humiliation. He bears grudges. But where's the she in this? The ego defense in paranoid PD is projection, which involves attributing one's unacceptable thoughts and feelings to other people. And that's roughly what paranoid personality disorder is.
Oh yeah, so the second one is schizoid personality disorder. And the term schizoid is in reference to directing your attention internally. So these people are prone to introspection and fantasy. They don't have any desire for any external interactions like social interactions, sexual relationships. They don't really care about social norms and conventions, like for what you're meant to do, and they don't have an emotional response because that would require empathy, which is purely to understand what someone else is thinking. So the competing theory is they are in fact, or they do in fact, highly sensitive people with a rich inner life, and that they would rather retreat into their inner world, because the outer world is either too difficult or distressing, and the inner world is much more nice and
Much more now.
well, it's
Beautiful.
Sorry, I am paraphrasing as we go.
No, it's fine, it's fine.
So these sorts of people are generally well functioning. They might have issues forming close relationships, but it's generally fine. They're quite functional. They don't. It doesn't normally present in any way which would hinder them, and well, they might seem a bit odd, but who isn't? Let's be honest, who isn't a bit odd?
Especially as stammers.
Yeah.
Schizotypal. Do I say it?
Schizotypal.
Schizotypal disorder. Schizotypal personality disorder is characterized by oddities of appearance, behavior, and speech. Unusual perceptual experiences and anomalies of thinking similar to those seen in schizophrenia. This later can include odd beliefs, magical thinking, for instance, thinking that speaking of the devil can make him appear. Sorry, I could just. I'm sorry, dude. suspiciousness and obsessive ruminations. People with schizoid often fear social interaction and think of others as harmful. I met people like that. They develop ideas of reference, that beliefs is happening, that everything is what's happening is related to them. They often avoid social interaction and find interacting with others difficult. Yeah. And now we go to the interesting ones.
Okay. This one is antisocial personality disorder. It is characterized by callous unconcern for the feelings of others. It's irritable and aggressive, acts impulsively, fails to learn from experiences, but he has no difficulty finding relationships. And I mean, this personality disorder is often belongs to the so-called charming psychopath. But these relationships are usually fiery, turbulent, and short-lived. Most closely correlated with crime, and is in and out of prison.
Me? Okay. The next one is borderline personality disorder. The borderline part is because it is on the border between anxiety disorders and psychotic disorders. So it's as an example, I think it's schizophrenia and bipolar, although I think that those are both ones. I don't know. Well, I don't think either of those are that anxiety related. Anyway, I might have dug myself into a hole there. So a person with this is basically fears they fear abandonment, and they lack a sense of themselves as being like someone who can take care of themselves. I horrendously screwed this up. Okay, so let's strike that through again.
No.
Borderline personality disorder.
I mean, everything is. You said it was right.
Is you have it's a borderline between anxiety disorders and psychotic disorders. So like your normal anxiety, which is your fears about things perhaps irrational, and your psychotic ones, which are your brain tells you things which you cannot distinguish as being false. Hence, it is by schizophrenia and bipolar come under the psychotic ones, because you cannot distinguish what's true. Hence, it's psychotic as opposed to a hallucination, which is you can distinguish. Anyway, because these people do not have a sense of themselves, they would feel emptiness and have fears of abandonment. The emptiness comes from not having a self to have the feeling of being self-fulfilled, and the abandonment is they would like put their sense of self into someone else.
Fuck it.
Is more, it's classed as being more common in women because the male equivalent is seems to be classed as antisocial personality disorder instead.
Yeah.
Igor.
Histrionic personality disorder. I honestly believe it's actually me,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that most of my best friends are and antisocial, and yeah, well, it makes good successful people.
Yeah, it's true.
Also,
It's true. Definitely true.
right?
Yeah. If you don't care what people think, it would
Yeah,
definitely
and
make you successful.
i- if you met a girl which can go from extremely happy and flowers and everything is cool to tears for no reason, like everything is so bad, you probably met borderline.
Yeah.
So now me, people, it called histrionic personality disorder. People with histrionic personality disorder lack sense of self-worth. Not really me. And it depends on for the well-being on attracting the attention and approval of others. They often seem to be dramatizing or playing part in a bid to be heard and seen. Indeed, histrionic derives from dialectic histrionitis, uh, portraying an actor. Well, yeah, I've been on the stage. So, I mean, I do like attention, and I think I pay attention to my the way I look. So yeah, it's kind of me. If you want to, if you are like me, look up for that. Uh, that's you, Tom.
Narcissistic personality disorder has an extreme feeling of self-importance, sense of entitlement, and a need to be admired. He is envious of others and expects others to be the same of him. Lacks empathy and readily lies and exploits others to achieve his aims. He may seem himself absorbed, controlling, intolerant, selfish, or insensitive. If he feels obstructed or ridiculed, he can fly into a fit of destructive anger and revenge.
So, an example of that one is Mr. Donald Trump.
Yes, yes.
Because he doesn't fit any of the other ones.
I would say he's nar- narcissistic psychopath.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think he's. Well, I drift between the two. Sometimes it's more one, sometimes more the other. But yeah, it's all good. Add together. So the eighth one is avoidant personality disorder. So these people believe they're inadequate, inferior, and they live in fear, a constant fear of being embarrassed or criticized, rejected by their peers.
That would be me.
So they, because it's avoidant, they obviously avoid things. So they avoid meeting people unless they know they're liked. They avoid any form of they will tend to avoid any interactions, which would be your relationships and all the rest of it. Incidentally, the avoidant personality disorder is the other half of what's mentioned in borderline. When I was mentioning the borderline between the anxiety disorders and psychotic ones. So avoidant people, they will because of this fear, they will take steps to make them not be embarrassed, rejected, or criticized, which may mean if anyone if anyone were to criticize or whatever for whatever reason, perhaps they had a bad day or whatever, these people are the ones who would really internalize that and then be more avoidant and try to completely avoid that situation ever again. Which I think sometimes I'm a bit like that. But I think not just the stammering, but I think how I approach problems is if something caused a problem, I take steps every time to avoid it. I think because I'm only reason I'm not quite that personality disorder type is I don't remember the dumb stuff I've said.
Well, as far as
Which
I
there's a
know,
lot.
avoidance, avoidant personality, they make great scientists. If you want something being well done, ask person with avoidant personality. He will avoid talking to you, but in order to compensate that, the work will be done extra fine.
It's true. Yeah.
You know,
if you can-
so me, I would have to have a less questions because it was done on purpose to eliminate all the questions,
yeah.
right?
That is how I write my emails and work. It's just avoid them coming back at all costs.
A dependent is a lack of self-confidence. And last
Yeah.
one,
The dependent personality disorder is you lack self-confidence in yourself, so you seek it in someone else. And if you are deprived of that person, you feel lost.
yes,
Like even if it's your
getting
you're deprived
attached
from
easy.
like half an hour, yeah, so you get attached easier. Incidentally, there's a whole school of thought with parenting. It's called attached parenting, and the idea of it is to basically spoon feed your kid to the point they are purposely to make them attached to you, because
Right,
the apparently the research points to these.
habituation.
Yeah, but the research points to the children who have had this, or the research at the time, which is a bit vague at the best of times. There was research at the time, which has been debunked as well, that people who have had attached parenting achieve higher and more sociable and all the rest of it. There's on this note, if you're really interested, there's a mention on this on a podcast called Science Versus, and they talk about this completely. But the dependent thing is the adult version of that, because the theory is
Right.
you would grow out of the attachment.
Love addicts, also all in this personality typage.
Yeah.
Who always in love in no matter what. And well, we get on
And the
last one,
Last one is
number 10.
anancastic personality disorder. It is characterized by excessive preoccupation with details, rules, lists, order, organization, or
So
schedules.
That's my
your
wife.
OCD,
Really?
Mm-hmm.
more or less.
Mm,
Well, as in, not about your
what is it?
wife, but as in OCD would be the more colloquial term for it.
Yeah. Yes, I'd say a particular kind of OCD.
Okay, could be.
Because I realised that there are actually lots of different strains, actually.
Strange.
Which I
It's like it's a
forever.
virus.
Well, you know, strains, variations, and they're usually very doubting, cautious, rigid, controlled, humorless, and miserly. The more he tries to understand the world and exert control over it, the less he can understand it or control. His relationships with colleagues, etc., are strained by unreasonable and inflexible demands that he makes upon them. Basically, a control freak.
But who's acting out of a desire
Yeah,
to have
control.
order.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, as opposed to having a desire to have control over someone else,
That's
it's
Order,
having
order.
it's even if the
Absolutely
people
right.
weren't there, they would still
There'd
have
still be
this
complications.
while someone who's a control freak would
Want other people to be controlled.
they would cease being as controlling if the people cease to exist.
I
while
see what you mean.
Someone
I see what you mean. Okay.
with OCD would continue to
Yeah, it
be
is more OCD. You're right.
to
Yeah, makes sense.
to be concerned about order, regardless of if the people existed or not.
And the reason why we brought up 10 personality disorders is in each personality disorder that there will be the same percentage of people who stutter.
That's true.
So yeah, and we all have it. 10% is less functional, 10% more functional. Everyone else in the middle. And we can't treat. Oh, hello. Yeah. My point is that we can't use mood altering medication to treat stuttering. Only like one of the reasons we have 10 different kind of people we have to identify. Yeah. So it's a long way to and this B vitamin B study for stuttering. Oh, I came up with a abbreviation for that. BS.
Go on.
B for stutter.
Yeah.
BS for yeah. This is how I.
B for stutter.
B
Feel-
for stutter.
This is
It's
yeah,
from an
and yeah, and as for bullshit.
Bullshit.
That how I feel about that research as well, and yeah. So it was a good podcast full of hate and science.
I think that's it. That's it for us. Until next time, I'm Eugene Wasowski Gallagher.
Alex is here, finding voices.
Tom Wheeler.
Yeah, no one will watch until the end this one. Okay, hold on.